shares secretly in a company that he regulates, introduce bill on pensions when he owns a pension company, where that minister can actually tell us that it's illegitimate to question his sale of shares right before introducing a tax measure. Mr. Speaker, times have changed for the worse.
Statement by members, déclaration de député. L'honorable député.
The honourable member for La Salle, Aymar-Verdun. Mr. Speaker, today I rise to pay tribute to 4 athletes in my riding who distinguished themselves during the World Martial Arts Championship in Dublin, in Ireland, in October. Antoine, Felix, Kingsley, Ruth Ann, as well as their sensei Danny Griffith, represented Canada, and they brought home a total of 11 medals. Felix, 10 years old, was crowned world champion in kata soft, and Ruth Ann, world champion for soft kata in the 35 and over category.
The karatekas from La Salle have reason to be proud of their performance. They've been practicing for a number of years now at the sides of their sensei Danny Griffith at the School of Karate Kenpo Danny Griffith School in La Salle. Mr. Speaker, it's the result of a number of years of effort, work, and perseverance, and I am proud to pay tribute to them today in this House. Thank you.
For Sarnia Lambton.
Mr. Speaker, I want to protest an ill-thought-out bill that is passing through Parliament here on the Hill. The bill that is bad is called C-45. It has so many flaws it just shouldn't survive. The grits will allow 4 pot plants in each dwelling, regardless of how bad each place will be smelling. With mold, ventilation as issues unplanned, this bill will not keep pot from our children's hand. There are more new infractions within this new rule that our courts will be flooded, as will every school. With drug-impaired driving and challenges there, the doubling of traffic deaths, and Liberals don't care. The provinces and police in every town have all asked the Liberals to slow this bill down. With nearly 200 more days left till the day, nobody but our party stands in the way. We hope that the Senate will do its true deed and keep our great country safe from all the weed.
L'honorable député de Pontiac.
The honourable member for Pontiac. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We are in the middle of 16 days of activism against sex-based violence, an initiative that will wrap up on December 10th. During these 16 days, activities to raise awareness, share experiences, and denounce violence against women are being held all across the world. I invite my fellow Canadians, both male and female, to participate in this initiative. In the days leading up to the National Day of Remembrance and Action on Violence Against Women, on December 6th, I would like to highlight the importance of the work carried out for women by organizations in my region. I'm thinking in particular of the Association des femmes immigrantes de l'Outaouais, l'Entourelle, la Table autonome des aînés des collines, la Clinique des femmes de l'Outaouais, the Centre Mechtilde, Agir Outaouais, le Calex de la vallée de Gatineau, le Comptoir Saint-Pierre de Fort-Collonges, Alfam, Haute-Gatineau, la Maison Libérale, and I could go on. These groups carry out important work to advance the public interest and I thank them from the bottom of my heart.
Speaker, today marks World AIDS Day. Since the virus was identified in 1984, it has proven to be one of the most destructive pandemics in history, resulting in the deaths of over 35 million people globally. Today we take a moment to mourn those who have been lost. While an AIDS diagnosis originally meant a death sentence, scientific research and the work of dedicated advocates, caregivers, and patients has brought a powerful message of prevention and critical destigmatization of the disease. Today, those living with HIV who have access to treatment and maintain an undetectable viral load do not transmit the virus to their sexual partners. This is a great achievement. However, it is still estimated 7 Canadians are affected each day with HIV, often from the most vulnerable populations. Today, I call on the government to expand the federal initiative on HIV/AIDS, create equal access to treatment for infected Canadians, and stop the practice of banning blood donations by men who have sex with men. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
L'honorable député de Madame.
The Honourable Member for Madawaska-Restigouche. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's a great pleasure to address this House to tell you about a marvellous initiative in my riding of Madawaska-Restigouche.
A number of communities in East Restigouche have gotten together to plan and organize a regional winter festival. Mr. Speaker, What makes this initiative so special is that Acadian, Irish, Scottish, and First Nation communities are all working together to organize this event. Toute une gamme
A wide array of cultural and sporting activities have been planned. Under the theme of Celebrate Our Cultures, musicians will warm hearts, storytellers will captivate young and old with Mi'kmaq, Acadian, and other stories.
Full event. Of course, my honorable colleagues in this chamber are also invited. Félicitations aux organisateurs.
Congratulations to the organizers of Balmoral, Charlotte, Dalhousie, Eel River Crossing, and Eel River Bar. And in the meantime, I would like to wish happy holidays to all Canadians, especially Madawaska Resu. The Honourable Member for Portneuf, Jacques Cartier. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The current government must respect citizens of the regions who have a community life and a daily reality different from those of people in large cities. Given the evolution of information technologies and the fast-moving deployment of digital services, regional medias must adapt to the reality of the market. There are a variety of assistance programs for various media, but nothing for written press. It's in newsrooms that a large number of the real news is produced, and in the era of fake news, it's important to have access to the truth. The right to information is a crucial element for all Canadians. For example, in my riding of Portneuf-Jacques-Cartier, I have a weekly newspaper called Le Courrier de Portneuf. This cooperative is presently in a precarious situation. They are doing much more with much less. The Minister of Heritage must take the problem seriously, have the decency to meet with the Fédération Nationale des Communications, and find a solution for the viability of regional weekly newspapers. Citizens of the regions must be respected. They also have a right to information on their community. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
For Sydney, Victoria.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today I rise to commend the Cape Breton Regional Hospital Foundation and all those who support the annual Cape Breton Regional Hospital fundraisers. On November 18th, the Festival of Greens raised $120,000 for Operation Heart. Because of these amazing donations, the hospital will have a new anesthesia machine to ensure incredible results in all the 11,000 surgical procedures that take place in the hospital every year. In addition to this fundraiser, a record-breaking $1,016,000 was fundraised in partnership with local radio stations on October 5th on their annual Radio Day event. Mr. Speaker, the contributions of Cape Bretoners to this cause go toward vital hospital elements like the Cape Breton Cancer Centre, treating 150 to 200 patients a day, the neonatal intensive unit that takes care of the little ones in our pediatrics unit, mental health services, and so much more. I commend all the volunteers, organizers, businesses, and donors that make these events such a great success and do so much for our community.
The Honourable Member for Northumberland, Peterborough South.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to acknowledge the recipients of the Canada 150 Constituency Awards in my riding of Northumberland, Peterborough South, all of whom represent community heroism. Some of them have been quietly doing good work for decades. Through their acts of generosity, our towns and villages are better places to live by their acts of selflessness. We have one young woman who has helped in the accessibility of health care and social services in Tanzania. We have another who quietly makes sure those who are hungry have warm soup, fresh sandwiches, and a kind smile. We have a young Indigenous youth who uses his music to raise funds and awareness for the causes he believes in, whether here or in the farthest north. These are but 3 recipients, Mr. Speaker. Many have been honored, many have never been honored publicly for their contributions. I'm glad these awards will mark a permanent testament to their efforts and the undeniable positive effects they've given to so many. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Markham, Unionville.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I wanted to wish Markham Unionville residents and their families a very Merry Christmas. Tonight, I will be attending the 37th Unionville Old-Time Christmas Parade down Main Street, Unionville. I'm excited to join my team once again and see thousands of residents get together in the spirit of Christmas. Once again, they will be selecting unwrapped toys to be donated to the mountain, to Toy Mountain for those who are less privileged this Christmas. I wanted to give a special thank you to Rotary Club and the Unionville BIA for organizing this parade once again. As well, thank you to the many community volunteers who helped me organize my float and will take part in the parade tonight. I can't wait to get there and celebrate with you. Once again, Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, ho, ho, ho.
The honourable member for Coast of Bays Central, Notre Dame.
Mr. Speaker, today I stand in this House to honor someone who stood in this great House for nearly 30 years, then in our Senate for another 15 years. He is the longest continuous serving person in this Parliament. I speak of former Member of Parliament, former Minister, Senator, and most importantly, a ferociously proud Newfoundlander, the Honourable George Baker. Born in Greens Harbour and spent most of his life in Gander with his wife Avril and his family, George Baker had a solid reputation for always speaking up and supporting his constituents, and for 8 federal elections in a row, his constituents returned the favour and supported him. He took on giants such as John Crosbie, Brian Mulroney, and at times took issue with his own side by taking on former Prime Minister Jean Chrétien. Recently retired from the Senate, not surprisingly, he now lives in Gander. George Baker leaves these hallways with some advice for all of us when he said, quote, "You do your best. You represent your constituents the best you can." Thank you, George.
The honourable member for Oakville.
Mr. Speaker, it is with a heavy heart that I rise today to remember a former Member of Parliament from my riding, Dr. Frank Philbrook. Frank served in the 30th Parliament of Canada, 1974 to 79, under the Right Honourable Pierre Trudeau, and was wholeheartedly devoted to serving the residents of Oakville and Halton. Frank used his experience as a physician both in Canada and abroad to serve Canadians. Having served on many parliamentary committees, including External Affairs and National Defence, Justice and Legal Affairs, and Health, Welfare and Social Affairs, it is clear that Frank was a hard-working and dedicated member of this place. Frank was the beloved husband of Midge for 62 years, father of 3 daughters, and grandfather to 5. Mr. Speaker, I would like to thank Frank for his service to Oakville, to this place, and to all Canadians. My thoughts are with his loved ones. Rest in peace, Frank.
The honourable member for Brandon Souris.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I rise today to stand up for the thousands of Canadians who suffer from disabilities and life-threatening illnesses. Every day they mount the courage to get out of bed, go to work, take care of their families, and do the best they can in very challenging circumstances. We know that for some unknown reason, Canada Revenue Agency has decided to go after these individuals and take away their right to claim the disability tax credit. We heard from witnesses at the Finance Committee how Canada Revenue Agency decided on a whim to deny their claims and put persons with disabilities at risk of losing funds already built up in their registered disability savings plans. As members of Parliament, we are here to stand up for our constituents and put their interests first and foremost. We are here to fight for their rights and to be the voice of those who often go unheard. Mr. Speaker, I urge the government to stop their delay tactics, stop the excuses, and fix this injustice once and for all.
The honourable member for Ottawa South.
Mr. Speaker, things are really cooking in my riding of Ottawa South. Last week I had the privilege of joining my municipal colleagues to open Ottawa's first ever community kitchen at the Albion Hetherington Community Centre. The kitchen is traditionally the heart of the home, but this kitchen will become the heart of the community. Canada's 150th birthday is a terrific time to celebrate the places across the country that unite and connect us. I was delighted to announce our government's contribution of $176,000 through the Canada 150 Community Infrastructure Program. This state-of-the-art kitchen, Mr. Speaker, will bring neighbours together to learn new cooking skills, understand the importance of healthy eating, and will help foster community engagement. Congratulations to everyone involved in this very worthwhile project. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Saskatoon West.
Mr. Speaker, on World AIDS Day, I am proud to highlight the incredible work of AIDS Saskatoon and to thank Jason Mercady and his caring, hardworking staff for being leaders in HIV prevention, awareness, and support. Saskatchewan has the highest rates of HIV in Canada at almost 3 times the national average, and almost half of all new cases are in Saskatoon. Stable housing means that people in my community living with HIV can stay on their medications, resulting in almost a 0% transmission rate. Research shows that 75% of homeless individuals living with HIV and no support will die within 5 years. A national plan to end and prevent homelessness that addresses the unique needs of those living with HIV would help turn the tide, not just in my community, but across Canada. I ask all members to support my motion, M147. Together we can plan to end homelessness. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Souris Moose Mountain.
Mr. Speaker, Confucius once said, "A man without a mustache is a man without a soul." He would know, having sported an outstanding stash of his own, and I'm here today to show you my attempt at this year's Movember campaign. The theme of the 2017 campaign was Imagine a World Without the Men You Love. Unfortunately for many, this can become a reality, as 1 in 2 men will be diagnosed with some form of cancer in their lifetime, and 1 in 7 men will be diagnosed with prostate cancer specifically. While Movember started off as a way to increase awareness about prostate cancer, it has expanded its scope and to include all men's health issues, including mental health and suicide prevention, which are equally as important as our physical health. Thank you to all members of this House who grew a mustache of their own. And congratulations to those who donated to this great cause so that we can raise awareness that men's health issues, all while having a bit of fun. Thank you to all Canadians, and especially thank you to Team Mopo Estevan. Grow your mo.
The honourable member for Hull-Aylmer.
Monsieur le Président,
Mr. Speaker, tomorrow the magnificent Christmas market in Old Aylmer will open. Tomorrow evening is also the traditional Santa Claus parade, also in Aylmer.
have served both as a celebration of the holiday season as well as a time to recognize the contributions of community groups in Aylmer. More than 30,000 people attend the Santa Claus parade each year. Chaque année, les organisateurs
Every year, organizers work very hard to ensure that the parade is a resounding success. They work tirelessly to recruit hundreds of volunteers. I would like to thank all of the organizing committee. Year after year, they ensure that the parade is a success and that our community feels the magic of Christmas. Long live the Christmas market, long live the Santa Claus parade, long live Aylmer, and long live the holidays. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Oral questions. Question orale. The honourable member for Carleton.
Mr. Speaker, public companies have something called a blackout period on the sale of shares by officers and directors. Those decision makers are forbidden from selling shares in their own company in the immediate lead up to quarterly earnings results, even when analysts or even the company itself have widely and accurately predicted what those results will be. In light of that corporate standard, which the minister should know, would it not have been more appropriate for him to wait until after the introduction of his tax measures before he sold his shares in Morneau Chapelle?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Finance.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think it's important to remind what's the tax measure in question. It's something that we announced during the campaign, that we campaigned on for 78 days, thanks to the previous government's long, never-ending campaign, where we said that we would raise taxes on the wealthiest 1%, on the personal income of the wealthiest 1%, to reduce it for 9 million Canadians. This was the least best secret in town. We told the media, we told Canadians we'd come back in Ottawa in December to do just that. And if the member opposite would care to read his own local newspaper, in the Ottawa Citizen, November 6, 2015, our priority is to get the tax reduction in place as quickly as possible, adding that the government's goal...
The honourable member for Carleton.
Yes, and the platform that they put out said that the tax measure would come in place April 1st, the beginning of the next fiscal year. So nothing is certain until it's actually tabled on the floor of the House of Commons. But even if it was widely predicted, when corporate earnings are widely predicted and even forecasted by the company itself, the leaders of those companies, officers and directors, are forbidden from selling shares in the immediate lead up to the release of those formal documents. That is a basic corporate standard. All I'm asking is why this minister would not hold himself to that same standard in this office.
Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And again, I'll finish because I think I was cut off the article in the Ottawa Citizen, November 6, 2015. our objective is to have the middle class tax cut in place for January 1st. Mr. Speaker, there has never been any secret in our plan to tax the wealthiest 1% and reduce taxes for the middle class. There is absolutely the accusations that the opposition are trying to make are completely baseless, and the fact that they don't dare to repeat them outside the House show to great certainty that they have nothing to back them up, Mr. Speaker. Thank you very much.
The honourable member for Carleton.
Well, let's talk about this famous tax policy. Well, this minister made sure to sell his shares before his tax increases took effect so that he wouldn't have to pay any of the taxes that he was imposing on others. But you know who is paying more now? People suffering with diabetes. And now we learn people suffering with autism are losing the disability tax credit, a tax increase of $1,500 for families who are suffering with great hardship. Why is it that whenever Liberals raise taxes, they always target those with the least?
The Honourable Minister of Revenue. The government committed that the NGD agency would apply tax credits fairly and accessibly. I announced the consultative committee on disabled persons. That committee was dissolved under the previous Conservative government in 2006. By re-establishing this committee, we will now be able to increase access to services on the part of the Canada Revenue Agency.
Honorable député de Beauce.
Well, member for Beauce. Mr. Speaker, it's unfortunate that today, once again, we have to ask the same question over and over again without getting an answer. One would expect a minister who's responsible for managing finances to be able to answer a simple question. We've put that question over and over again. We have a right to ask these questions because there's a problem with the behavior of the Minister of Finance. Given these problems, these ethical problems, why doesn't the Minister of Finance simply resign? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Finance. Well, I didn't necessarily see a real question. I mean, there was not a real question.
De Beauce.
Member for Beauce. Well, we're asking the minister to resign, given that we have lost trust in the person responsible for managing our finances. He's not able to manage his own assets. He didn't disclose his villa. He has himself worked on Bay Street, so he must be aware of all the rules covering these kinds of transactions. And if he is trying to uphold the highest of standards, he's not doing that. He's not even consulting Canadians, the Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. Mr. Speaker. The question from the member of Beauce is a perfect example of what the opposition is trying to do. Just mix everything up in one big pot and then send out these baseless attacks. We have confidence in the Minister of Finance. 600,000 jobs have been created over the past 2 years. The numbers came out today. They've never understood this. And the Minister of Finance has our complete confidence.
Berthier-Masquinongé.
Mr. Speaker, this government has set a new record for unfilled appointments, including the appointments of parliamentary watchdogs. Yesterday, they released the names of their picks for the positions of official languages and lobbying commissioner. Once again, they failed to consult the opposition. Our parliamentary leader requested the list of candidates so that we can engage in something called real consultation. Mr. Speaker, will the government share the list of candidates for both appointments with the opposition, yes or no?
The Honourable Minister of Canadian Heritage.
In terms of official languages, generally speaking, and bilingualism, the NDP has obviously lost all its credibility, and now it's trying to once again sully the responsibility of the new official languages commissioner. I consulted with the NDP critic. I was responded to by a letter. Last week again I had an opportunity to consult. I was told three things: to consult with organizations, to appoint a candidate from the Acadie, which we did. So we've responded to the three requests from the NDP, and we have an excellent candidate. They're saying just about anything they can think of, Mr. Speaker. We're talking about consultations. We want the government to work with the opposition. Mr. Speaker, I don't think the government has learned anything from the Madeleine Meilleur fiasco. Appointing officers of Parliament who work for all members in this House must be done in true consultation with all recognized parties in this House. So I'm repeating my question. Will the government disclose the list of the selection committee members and the names of people who are on the short list, yes or no? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. We consulted leaders of the official parties on these appointments for the lobbying commissioner as well. And once approved by Parliament, Ms. Bélanger will have a 7-year mandate. We welcome all ideas and suggestions of individuals from all parties in this process. This is an open and transparent process, and we are proud of that.
Honorable député de Belleuil-Chambly.
Honourable member for Belleuil-Chambly. Well, it could have been so much less complicated if Skeena-Bulkley Valley members' motion was adopted on appointing officers of Parliament. But on another topic, yesterday in the National Security Committee, we heard from the Minister of Public Safety for only 1 hour on an omnibus 138-page bill. Mr. Speaker, when you're talking about national security and rights and freedoms and the protection of privacy, you can't just simply get rid of that quickly. We had 1 hour with the minister, 2 hours with officials, another hour with officials. That's not enough. Will the Minister of Public Safety commit to coming back before the National Security Committee to answer members of Parliament's questions on this omnibus bill?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Public Safety.
Well, Mr. Speaker, never before have Canadians been so engaged on the issue of national security. In fact, the broadest consultations in Canadian history happened on Bill C-59. And I want to thank the member opposite and the committee as well for their months of work in study of the National Security Intelligence Framework. The minister was able to point directly to the work of the committee and how it influenced the creation of that bill. I think this is an excellent example of not only profound and deep national consultation, but the committee working excellently together. And I look forward, because the bill has been moved at first reading, to be able to work with the member in a very open way to make sure that...
L'honorable député de Belleuil.
The honourable member for Belleuil-Chambly.
The member's compliments, but we're talking about the minister appearing for 1 hour on a 138-page bill that, by the government's own admission, is the biggest overhaul of these pieces of legislation in 30 years. If they think that that's sufficient, then they don't understand what they're doing, Mr. Speaker. It just doesn't work. And this is in a context where we're hearing more and more about some of CSIS's questionable spying practices with the use of things like Stingray technologies. And there's still many questions about a too low threshold for information sharing in the current legislation. There's issues around new powers for CSC, a whole slew of questions, Mr. Speaker, that we haven't even had a chance to ask. But I asked the government this. In their new legislation, when will they finally take Canadians' private...
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Well, Mr. Speaker, the changes that we've tabled are not only comprehensive, but they're recognized as really being on the vanguard, leading the world in the issue of bringing our protection of Canadians in terms of both their security and their rights to bear. And I would say, well, we're at the beginning of this process. The member knows that I'm there every single day at the committee, that I'm at his disposal to answer his questions any day of the week, that the committee proceedings are following detailed work that was done on the security and intelligence framework and the most exhaustive consultations that happened on a national basis. I look forward to continuing.
The honourable member for Louis-Saint-Laurent. Mr. Speaker, the main job of the opposition is to ask questions on facts, and that's what we do. The main job of the government is to answer those questions, which the government is not doing. Mr. Speaker, for the past week, we have been asking dozens of questions to the Minister of Finance to find out if he is the one who sold $680,000 worth of shares, representing about $10 million, from Morneau Shepell on the 30th of November 2015. We never got an answer. Mr. Speaker, could the Minister of Finance stand up and finally come clean with Canadians? That's what they want. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Finance. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Now, I think if the member had been listening to what the minister was saying, he would have heard the minister say that he sold shares after coming into office, and that he even gave almost $5 million to charitable organizations. Now, yes, the job is to ask questions. Yes, they're supposed to hold the government accountable, but not to launch personal attacks of the like that we have seen over the past week. There was no insider training, and don't take my word. Here, listen to
that Mono engaged in insider.
L'honorable député de Louis Saint-Laurent.
The honourable member for Louis Saint-Laurent. Mr. Speaker, I would like the parliamentary secretary to quote the exact answer from the Minister of Finance when he was asked yes or no if he sold shares on the 30th of November 2015. The question was clear, and he never, ever, ever even gave the beginning of an answer. So could the Minister of Finance please finally stand up and state clearly to the Canadians whether he is the one who sold those $680,000 worth of shares? We're not talking about buying socks. We're talking about thousands of dollars worth of shares. The parliamentary secretary, the Minister of Finance was clear. He did sell shares in that period of November and December. But the question is, where's the story here? Could the opposition please explain how this could have had an impact? We were clear from the very beginning on tax measures we were planning on coming in, that we were coming to Ottawa to tax the wealthiest 1%, to bring it down, bring taxes down for the middle class. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Carlton Trail, Eagle Creek.
Mr. Speaker, while the Minister of Finance has not told us much, what he has said is that he gave direction to sell some shares in his family company when he came into office. He said he doesn't remember exactly when, just like he didn't remember that he owned a company in France. These non-answers simply raise more questions. Why didn't the finance minister take the opportunity to sell all of his shares in Morneau Chapelle when he was first elected, instead of hiding them in a numbered company in Alberta?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
I'm trying to understand the line of reasoning. They're saying he should have sold all his shares or he shouldn't have sold all of his shares. Mr. Speaker, the fact is, what I see from this week on the opposition's part is they want to talk about anything else but the economy, because on that front, the finance minister has delivered for Canadians more than they ever could in the 10 years they were in power, with 600,000 jobs created, most of them full-time, the fastest growth in the G7, and the unemployment rate in its nearest lows in a decade, and its lowest in a decade. So that's the finance minister's record, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Carlton Trail, Eagle Creek.
Well, Mr. Speaker, what we have learned is that the Minister of Finance is quite forgetful. He forgot to disclose the company that holds his French villa. He forgot to ask the Ethics Commissioner for clearance to introduce Bill C-27, and he can't seem to recall when he sold 680,000 shares in Morneau Chapelle. Perhaps he will remember this. Before he made his late November 2015 sale of those 680,000 shares, did the minister clear it with the Ethics Commissioner first?
Yes. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. What the Conservatives forgot for 10 years was to grow the economy and to take care of the middle class, and that's something the Finance Minister has done remarkably well in the last 2 years, creating 600,000 jobs, growing our economy at the fastest pace in the G7, and I do understand why they don't want to talk about it. They focus on the Finance Minister making all sorts of false and baseless accusations they wouldn't dare to repeat outside. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Barrie, Innisfil.
Finance Minister has been asked directly many times if he was the one who sold 680,000 shares of Morneau Chapelle stock on November 30th, 2015. He said he gave instructions to sell some stock when he was elected 42 days earlier, but says he doesn't know or won't say when the sale happened. The minister seems to have a hard time recalling specifics about his assets, like forgetting he owned a French company for 2 years. I'll make it easy. Can the minister confirm the number of shares he gave instructions to sell was, in fact, 680,000?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The minister said it time and time again in this House that he sold shares when he took office, when he arrived in Ottawa, and that he's always worked as well with the Ethics Commissioner to make sure that all rules are followed. He's followed her recommendation to the letter when she said to put in place a conflict of interest screen. That's what he's done, and he's been working for the last 2 years to grow this economy, to create jobs for Canadians, to reduce inequalities, and he's done it remarkably well.
The honourable member for Barrie Innisfil.
Mr. Speaker, there's been multiple issues with the finance minister. He didn't have his assets in a blind trust after he said he did and would. Controlling assets in numbered companies, not declaring a French corporation, introducing Bill C-27, for which he's now under investigation, a pension change that could directly affect his company, and now this share issue. So I ask this question, Mr. Speaker, why can't the finance minister see how Canadians find it hard to trust him after he's broken their trust?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I think the 600,000 Canadians who have jobs now over the last 2 years as a result of the work of this government, of this finance minister, who's created the conditions for prosperity for all in this country, would have the utmost confidence in the finance minister.
I'm sure the honourable member for Barrie Innisfil would like to hear the answer to his question. I just want to remind the honourable members not to shout across the floor when someone is answering or asking a question. The honourable parliamentary secretary has, I believe, another 22 seconds.
20,000 children in my riding who receive more money, whose families receive more money through the Canada Child Benefit, that's lifted 300,000 kids out of poverty, would have the utmost confidence in the finance minister and his taking care of the real needs of Canadians, while the opposition is playing politics as they always do.
The honourable member for Nanaimo, Ladysmith.
The Liberals' S3 proposal doesn't end discrimination in the Indian Act, doesn't help all women, and shouldn't be subject to consultation. Indigenous women have been loud and clear. Discrimination should end for all Indigenous women. Right. Although Bill S3 meets some of the court's order, it fails to bring justice for all Indigenous women. The Liberals promised they'd be better. They promised a real nation-to-nation relationship. Does the minister concede this bill fails to end gender discrimination for all Indigenous women?
Hear, hear.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Crown and Indigenous Relations.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I want to thank my colleague opposite for her question. I think it goes without saying that our government is very committed to working with First Nations, parliamentarians, and all those individuals that have been impacted by the discriminatory factors and clauses within the Indian Act. We are making historic amendments to this bill today, and we are remedying all sex-based inequities that have existed going back to 1869. Those that existed prior to 1951 will come into force immediately. Those extending beyond.
The honourable member for Saskatoon West.
Mr. Speaker, First Nations women shouldn't have to wait for their human rights. Today is World AIDS Day, and for a year, doctors in my home province have urged the Liberals to declare a public health state of emergency, as Saskatchewan has the highest rate of HIV in Canada. 79% of those newly diagnosed are Indigenous peoples, and with the closure of STC, many have difficulty accessing medical services. Community groups have said they cannot wait for government to act. They need solutions now. Will the government support their efforts to address the HIV crisis in Saskatchewan?
Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Indigenous Services.
Mr. Speaker, our government is deeply committed to addressing HIV, AIDS, and hepatitis C in Canada, including in First Nation communities in Saskatchewan. Budget 2017 included initial investments of $37.5 million over 5 years to support the prevention and control of HIV and hepatitis C amongst First Nation and Inuit communities. In collaboration with First Nation leadership in the province of Saskatchewan, we have supported a growing number of Know Your Status initiatives, which have been very effective, increasing access to testing, follow-up, and treatment. We will continue working in partnership with First Nation leadership in Saskatchewan communities in the province to prevent transmission of HIV and other sexually transmitted and
The honourable member for Lakeland.
Mr. Speaker, Global National reports the finance minister's father and company founder sold 100,000 Morneau Shepell shares each on November 23rd and December 3rd, 2015. Someone sold 680,000 Morneau Shepell shares on November 30th. On December 7th, the finance minister tabled tax changes, details which had been confidential. Morneau Shepell shares immediately dropped 5%, taxes went up, so the sales earned maximum value. Yesterday, in question period, the minister still said he doesn't know when he sold his shares. How is that possible?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Finance.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The minister said that he sold some shares when he arrived in Ottawa. That was during that period of November and December. Now, I just failed to understand the line of reasoning from the opposition. Let me just it's important to understand also how the stock market works, and I'll just quote Doug Porter, BMO chief economist, who says, already low oil prices dropped heavily that day, December 7, by 5%. He said that factor alone may have been responsible for much of the weakness in the market. There are many factors influencing the stock market, and it's very hard to fathom that a policy that had been public, that we said we would come to Ottawa to do, to raise taxes on personal income for the wealthiest 1%, would have an impact on any given stock.
The honourable member for St. Albert, Edmonton.
Mr. Speaker, the Minister of Finance says that his sale of 680,000 shares in Morneau Shepell days before he announced tax changes, a sale that saved him a cool $500,000, had nothing to do with the tax changes and everything to do with divesting himself upon being sworn in as minister. If the sale was really about divestment, then can the minister explain why it is that he held 1 million shares in Morneau Shepell until 1 month ago?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The minister has always been clear that he sold some shares, never denied it when he took office in Ottawa, and the shares of Morneau Shepell have gone up since that day. So I failed to understand the reasoning from the opposition member. And let me be clear, the tax measure that we introduced in December 2015 was to raise personal income taxes for the wealthiest 1%. It was something that we promised, it was something we campaigned on, and I'm very proud that we moved on at that important commitment for Canadians, where we lowered taxes for 9 million Canadians.
The honourable member for Sturgeon River, Parkland.
Yesterday, Global National reported that the finance minister's father sold 200,000 shares of Morneau Shepell stock days before his son announced tax changes on December 7th. The finance minister also admits that he sold some shares before he announced those very same tax measures. We know that the finance minister did not hold his stocks in a blind trust, so he had direct control of his shares. Did the finance minister ask the ethics commissioner for permission to sell those shares?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Mr. Speaker, when you think the opposition could not go any lower, lo and behold, they do. And now they're trying to implicate the finance minister's father, and I think that's just disgraceful. And just to quote the Financial Post this morning, they're saying the attacks by the Tories are becoming unethical in and of themselves, and I think the opposition can do better than that. Thank you, Mr.
Speaker. The honourable member for Beauport-Limoilou, Côte-de-Beauport, Île-Charlevoix. Mr. Speaker, I am sick to the stomach before this government and its outrageous arrogance before the members of this House. We were elected to defend Canadian men and women. On behalf of taxpayers, we must ask questions. That's our responsibility. We will no longer accept that the Prime Minister and the Minister of Finance play the bullying card and refuse to answer our questions. Is the Minister waiting for an investigation to shed light on his actions, or will he do the only honourable thing left and resign? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I respect the member of the opposition who comes from my region. Yes, it's the role of the opposition to ask questions and direct questions, but it is not the role of the opposition to launch personal attacks that are baseless. And that's what we've seen this past week, all week. And I think that's what is disgraceful, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Drummond. Mr. Speaker, we just received an internal report from the Department of Justice that the government's been hiding since March 2017. Why? Because it is damning. The government redirected more than $40 million from the program to enforce the Contraventions Act between 2008 and 2018. This money should have been invested to improve access to justice in both official languages, but it was spent elsewhere. There are organizations closing their doors because of a lack of funding. Can the government commit to spending money where it promised it would?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Justice.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I want to thank my colleague for the question.
The notion that the Department of Justice has hidden any report. We've been transparent in all manner of appointments, in all manner of providing support to legal aid clinics. As a matter of fact, Mr. Speaker, this government has topped up legal aid clinics, enhancing access to justice, in particular for victims, and we're very proud of that work. We will continue to do it. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Burnaby South.
Mr. Speaker, yesterday on committee I asked the Science Minister to explain the mysterious case of disappearing federal scientists, but I didn't get a full answer. According to Statistics Canada, in 2012, during the worst year of Stephen Harper's war on science, the federal government employed 37,000 scientists and researchers. This number dropped to 35,500 when the Liberals took power. But under this minister, the Liberals only employ 34,500 researchers, 1,000 fewer than when they took office. Where did they go?
Honourable Minister of Science.
Mr. Speaker, after a decade of darkness, the federal government is rebuilding its science capacity. Last year, we invested in our people and started hiring more than 135 new scientists for DFO alone. This year, Budget 2017 is investing $60 million in the National Research Council, the crown jewel of federal research system. We're also investing in new spaces for researchers, including $80 million for a new plant health research in Sydney, BC.
Honourable Member for Hamilton East, Stony Creek.
Mr. Speaker, today I stand in recognition of World AIDS Day, a day whereby we can all work together to reduce the stigma of this tragic illness and provide support to those affected by it. Can the Minister of Health please inform this House about what actions our government is taking to address HIV and AIDS in Canada?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I want to thank my colleague from Hamilton Stony Creek for this important question and his important advocacy on this issue. World AIDS Day is a reminder that HIV/AIDS remains a persistent health issue around the world, and our government is deeply committed to addressing it. This morning, I was pleased to announce $26.4 million in investments for 84 projects involving 122 organizations and almost $10 million for 5 research projects. These projects will help reduce stigma and prevent HIV, hepatitis C, and other sexually transmitted and blood-borne diseases. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Calgary, Nose Hill.
Mr. Speaker, when I asked him about his decision to remove listing female genital mutilation as a crime from Canada's Citizenship Guide, the Prime Minister said he scolded the Liberian government. However, reports obtained by Global News show the Canada Border Services Agency has been on the alert for the arrival in Canada of practitioners of FGM for more than a year. I ask again, knowing this, will the Prime Minister reverse his decision to delete listing FGM as a crime from Canada's Citizenship Guide?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Mr. Speaker, female genital mutilation is an abhorrent and unacceptable practice, and it is against the law. Canada has and will continue to make efforts to prevent and address FGM, and through our gender-based violence strategy, frontline service providers will have the resources to better respond to the needs of survivors of gender-based violence, including survivors of female genital mutilation. Our government will always defend and promote women and girls' rights at home and globally, Mr. Speaker.
Well done.
The Honourable Member for Calgary, Nose Hill.
No answer. The Toronto Star has reported that government documents show that Canadian girls are being taken abroad to undergo female genital mutilation. This report also noted that Canada is lagging far behind other developed countries in efforts to prevent this from happening. Part of combating this prevention needs to be arming women with knowledge of their rights, especially those that are new to Canada. Will the Prime Minister reverse his decision to delete listing FGM as a crime from Canada's Citizenship Guide?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Immigration.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Our government, as you know, has committed to a complete reform of the Citizenship Guide under the Conservatives because it did not meet the information needs of Canadians.
We've held more extensive consultations with more stakeholders, including Indigenous organizations and national experts. We want to better represent Canada's diversity and give more room to groups like women, Francophone communities, LGBTQ communities. I want to indicate that the guide is still being developed. We're going to analyze all the comments we've received before making a well-reasoned decision.
Mr. Speaker, Larry and Diana Badke had 64 acres of their property in the Caribou destroyed by BC wildfires. When the Prime Minister came out, they believed him when he pledged to stay with them every step of the way. They need an answer they have been waiting for weeks. Will property owners who must salvage burned timber be charged capital gains in spite of the enormous cost of the repairs to their property? They've been waiting. We've been asking, will the minister stand up and tell us today, is she going to be charging them capital gains on the salvage of timber?
The Honourable Minister of National Revenue. Mr. Speaker, we recognize that Canadians affected by forest fires, especially British Columbia, are facing challenges. The agency is committed to helping them and to lighten their burden. The agency has measures in place for Canadians who face natural catastrophes like those experienced in British Columbia. These types of tax breaks are conducted on an individual basis.
Mr. Speaker, that is not an answer. In July, the Prime Minister swept into my riding and pledged to help every family impacted by the BC wildfires. However, once the cameras were gone, his government has been unwilling and unable to answer a simple question. We've been trying to get an answer from this Revenue Minister for weeks. So a simple question: will private property owners who have lost everything and now who must salvage the timber off of their property be faced with capital gains taxes? Yes or no?
The Honourable Minister for National Revenue. Mr. Speaker, we recognize that Canadians affected by forest fires, especially those in British Columbia, are facing difficulties. The agency is committed to lightening their burden. The agency has breaks for taxpayers when natural disasters occur, such as the forest fires that occurred in British Columbia. Every request for a tax break is reviewed individually. Thank you. The Honourable Member for Jonquière. Mr. Speaker, the Standing Committee on Government Operations and Estimates tabled the report The Way Forward for Canada Post over a year ago. The government committed to revealing its vision of the future of our postal service by the end of 2017. We're still waiting. It's December 1st. There are 2 weeks left in the session. Can the minister promise that she will present her vision before the end of the parliamentary session? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. Mr. Speaker, indeed, this government has kept its promise. The moratorium on conversion to community mailboxes. 2 major reports have been drafted. The Parliamentary Committee, which we thank for their hard work, as well as a special working group that was struck to study the broad orientations of Canada Post. As the Minister has indicated several times, we are going to make our decision on the orientations of Canada Post by the end of the year. Thank you. The Honourable Member for Jonquière. Data from the last census is discouraging, and it indicates that the wage gap between men and women remains. Women who have a BA earn about $13,000 less annually than men who have the same educational level, $13,740. Nearly a year ago, an NDP motion on pay equity was passed in this House, and there's still nothing from the government. When is the government going to recognize pay equity as a right and rectify this injustice?
The Minister of Employment.
Well, Mr. Speaker, it's a great day for jobs and employment in Canada. Canadians have created over 600,000 jobs since we've taken office, almost 80,000 this month alone. But The gender wage gap, as my colleague notes, remains high, which is why we're showing leadership to address this aspect of the gender wage gap, and equal pay for work of equal value. Pay equity is a critical component. Our consultations on how to do so are over, and we'll be introducing proactive pay equity legislation in 2018. Thank you.
The honourable member for Edmonton-Wetaskiwin.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, it's now been 253 days since the Finance Minister rejected the Canadian Autism Partnership, and it's very clear that the government has no idea how they're going to replace it. Mr. Speaker, this broad partnership would have worked with autism organizations and governments across the country, providing expert advice on issues facing people with autism. Issues exactly like the serious one raised by Autism Canada in regards to the disability tax credit. Families are using words like frustrating and maddening and heartbreaking to describe the situation. But, Mr. Speaker, most of all, what they want to know is, what is the government doing to fix this?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. We recognize that autism spectrum disorder has a significant impact on families and individuals. Federal investments in research, data improvement, surveillance, and training skills are supporting those with autism and their families. There is an extraordinary network of stakeholders across the country raising awareness and providing services to families. Our government will continue to support these efforts through our programs. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Lévis-Lobinière. Mr. Speaker, communication problems are adding up in the Office of the Minister for the Canada Revenue Agency. Many organizations that advocate for the well-being of persons with a disability want to talk to the Minister. Recently, Autism Canada asked via letter to have a conversation with the Minister. Mr. Speaker, can the Minister of Revenue confirm on what date she will meet the organization Autism Canada? The Minister of National Revenue. Mr. Speaker, I want to inform my colleague that I met Autism Canada this week. Thank you.
The honourable member for Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Islands and Rideau Lakes.
Mr. Speaker, families with children who have autism need the disability tax credit to help offset the cost of expensive therapy. The Liberals are nickel and diming these families to pay for their out-of-control spending. It's a disgusting attack on vulnerable Canadians. Don't these families have enough to deal with without having to fight the Liberals to get the credits that they need?
The Honourable Minister for National Revenue. Mr. Speaker, last week we proudly announced that we were going to re-establish the Consultative Committee for Handicapped Persons at the agency, which had been dissolved by the Conservatives. We recognize that the autism spectrum disorder has a significant impact throughout the lives of individuals and their families. Federal investments in research, in improving data, monitoring and training, support people affected by autism and their families. There is an extraordinary network throughout the country that creates awareness and offers services to families. Our government will continue to support these efforts throughout all of our programs, Mr. Speaker.
Nova.
Mr. Speaker, this week the Prime Minister stood in this House and addressed past wrongs done to the LGBTQ2 community, acknowledging and apologizing for this dark chapter in our history. At
the same time, the Prime Minister indicated that there's still work to be done, especially when it comes to excessive criminalization of the non-divulgation of HIV.
Actions being taken to address this serious issue.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Justice.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to thank the member for West Nova for this question and for his excellent work. We all have a duty to make sure that discrimination and stigmatization of people who live with HIV is reduced.
The Minister of Justice released a report addressing overcriminalization within the HIV community, which can discourage testing and treatment and ultimately increase rates of infection. By treating HIV first and foremost as a public health issue, and by tailoring the use of the criminal law, we will improve the health of our citizens while maintaining the safety of our communities. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Montmagny, Liselet, Kamouraska, Rivière-du-Loup. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. There are workers in my riding who go to work at Davie Shipyard every day, and they are extremely proud that they delivered to the Navy the resupply ship Asterisk on time and at the best price without any cost overruns. Building this second ship is essential to meet the operational needs of the Navy, but the Liberals have recently blocked them. Will the Ministers of Defence and Procurement go to Lévis this Sunday to explain to the workers how they plan to resupply our ships, which defend 3 oceans, with one single ship? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Obviously, the National Shipbuilding Strategy has opportunities that could occur in shipyards throughout the country. We are very proud of the work that has been accomplished by Davie Shipyard, by the men and women there. We are very proud of the ship that we are soon going to receive. I will say that that the Conservatives were not present when the National Shipbuilding Strategy was in place, which excluded Davie, and we have been working very hard to include Davie in our shipbuilding strategy. The Honourable Member for Ottawa-Vanier. Mr. Speaker, Canadians are rightly proud of their democracy, and an important principle underpinning that democracy is that of equal access.
Secretary, to the Minister of Democratic Institutions, update this House on the government's response to the Court of Queen's Bench of Alberta ruling on the $1,000 deposit for federal election candidates.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Mr. Speaker, I want to thank my colleague for Ottawa-Vanier for her question and for her good work.
Inclusive democratic process in which more Canadians, not fewer, should be able to participate. We are committed to improving our democratic institutions and restoring Canadians' trust and participation in our democracy. Therefore, we will not be appealing the recent ruling in Alberta. We acknowledge the Elections Canada decision to apply the Alberta ruling across the country so that we can have one set of rules for all Canadians. Prospective candidates will no longer be required to pay a $1,000 deposit as part of their nomination process. I look forward to working with all members to strengthen, protect, and improve our democracy. Mr. President.
For Peace River, Westlock.
Mr. Speaker, every year, hundreds of Canadian women are caught up in the vicious cycle of sex trafficking. Yet, since coming into power, the Liberals have allowed the fight against human trafficking to languish. They have allowed the National Action Plan to combat human trafficking to expire. They have ended federal funding to NGOs and obstructed important tools for police that were adopted by this House. And they've introduced legislation to block consecutive sentencing for sex traffickers. When will this government step up and start fighting this horrific form of modern-day slavery?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Public Safety.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Human trafficking is abhorrent, and we must do everything within our power to stop it. And that's why we work with our domestic and international partners to protect victims and to ensure that we can do everything we can to stop this practice. Recently, we introduced Bill C-38 to give police and prosecutors new tools to investigate and prosecute human trafficking offences. We have also introduced Bill C-21, which gives important tools to combat cross-border crimes. I look forward to working with the member on this important issue.
L'honorable député de Repentigny.
The Honourable Member for Repentigny. For the Minister of Heritage, print media is obsolete. If she doesn't see it on a tablet, its time has passed. In an era of multiplying sources of information, the Minister is subtracting them. Quality information, Mr. Speaker, is essential for the health of a democracy, and it is our responsibility to support it. Will the Minister listen to the journalistic community and set up a program or a fund to support our national and regional daily newspapers? The Minister of Canadian Heritage. Thank you. It is my pleasure to send the speech that I gave in September either via print or electronically. We are going to continue to support local media throughout the country. However, we also want to make sure that we can help them through this difficult transition in order to maintain reporters' positions and journalism throughout the country. We know that journalism is the basis of our democracy, and as a government, we believe in the importance of print media, regardless of the format, whether it be print or electronic. The Honourable Member for Repentigny. Mr. Speaker, Léonie Tavithra Lawrence is a perfect example of a refugee who integrated into Quebec and made it stronger. But the government wants to deport her and her whole family. Listen, Mr. Speaker, the school board has asked the government to reconsider. Both the opposition in Quebec and the opposition here are asking the government to reconsider that decision. The government of Quebec says it wants to find a way. In short, all of Quebec society wants to keep the Lawrence family with them. They're going to be sent away Sunday if nothing happens. Will the minister overturn this decision? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I share the concerns of the member on the other side. As you know, because of Canadian laws on the protection of privacy, we cannot comment on specific cases. Every case is unique. It has to be evaluated on its own merits and meet with Canadian laws. We want to make sure that every case subject to the law is evaluated on its merits and fairly. Every candidate can expect impartial and fair treatment. The Honourable Member for Joliette. It's happening Sunday. The government needs to hurry up. Before the Prime Minister leaves for China next week, we want an explanation. We know that on May 19th, the Prime Minister participated in a $1,500 a plate dinner with the founder of a bank for the Chinese community in Vancouver. On July 7th, the Liberal government authorized that bank. What we did not know is that 48 hours later, the Prime Minister received $70,000 from wealthy Chinese individuals from Vancouver for the Liberal Party of his riding. If that's not an exchange for a favor, what is it?
Leader.
Speaker, as I've said in this House many times, we have some of the strictest rules when it comes to fundraising in our country, and the assertions that the member is making are entirely false, as confirmed by the Conflict of Interest Commissioner. Not only that, but the Liberal Party has moved forward with the strongest standards in federal politics for openness and transparency, including facilitating media coverage, advancing posting, hosting in publicly accessible spaces, and timely reporting of event details, and the guest list. So we committed to Canadians a more open and transparent government. That's exactly what we're doing. We look forward to opposition members following the lead of this government. Thank you, Mr.
The Honourable Member for Saanich, Gulf Islands.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. For more than 30 years, every federal government in this country and every Prime Minister, regardless of political stripe, has stood up to defend the Canadian interests in the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge. The Trump administration, through a GOP budget bill, is now proposing to reopen the issue with a threat of oil and gas development on the U.S. side of the shared territory of the Gwich'in people, where they depend on the porcupine caribou, and the porcupine caribou depend on those calving grounds. Can the Minister of Environment tell us what steps this government has taken to protect the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge?
The Honourable Minister of the Environment.
Canada absolutely supports conservation of the porcupine caribou's herd habitat and is opposed to any development of the Arctic Wildlife Refuge. We certainly oppose opening these areas to resource development. I've been very clear in my discussions with the U.S. administration, as has our entire government. We recently hosted an event at our embassy in Washington, D.C., where a united Canadian position consisting of the federal, tribal, and territorial governments jointly discussed the importance of the porcupine caribou herd for the Gwich'in peoples and other Indigenous peoples in the Yukon and the Northwest Territories, and our clear opposition to the development in the critical habitat areas like the Arctic Refuge and the 1002 area.
And that ends oral questions for the day. Nous avons un appel au règlement.
We have a call to order. Mr. Speaker, earlier, the Parliamentary Secretary of the Minister of Finance spoke about the tax policy tabled by the government on December 7th, 2015, saying that it would increase tax on the richest. With the consent of the Chamber, I would like to table the following.
2017, page 16, quote, personal income tax revenue decreased by $1.2 billion, largely reflecting the impact of tax planning by high-income individuals. That's the truth, Mr. Speaker.
Je crois que c'est le débat.
I believe that it's a debate, and it's a debate that the Honourable MP has started, but do we have unanimous consent? No, we do not. The Honourable Minister on the point of order. Mr. Speaker, I would just like to confirm with my colleague across the way when he asked me the question. I understood that I was asked if I had met with diabetes